I spent the last 4 years at the University of Murto, and one thing I recall distinctly being concerned about before walking through those gates was regarding ragging. Everything I had heard about ragging, which was associated with state universities in Sri Lanka, was like folklore to me. It was always someone saying something they'd heard from someone else. And occasionally, these stories would be substantiated by heartbreaking stories the media would report on. But fast forward to 2025, and the stories are just as absurd. I personally believe the topic of ragging is a very complex one. There's so much nuance to it, so it's often misunderstood. So, as someone that's been on the inside and survived 4 years in a state university, I think it's a very necessary topic to be discussed, broken down, and of course, dealt with. I want to preface all of this by saying this discussion is not a conclusive one, it's more open-ended, because this is just me sharing my experience in an environment that has had a reputation for this kind of practice, things I've seen and heard from first-hand experiences. I am by no means the most educated, knowledgeable, or qualified to be discussing this topic. I was actually kind of hesitant to do it in the first place. But as someone that has personally experienced the fear of going into a state university not knowing what to expect, I feel like hearing something like this might have given me the perspective I needed at that time in my life. The goal of the video is to do just that, to share my perspective and thoughts based on my own experiences, which differ so much to other people and even the people that might have been in the building next to me, and more so on other campuses in the country. So if you have similar stories or majorly different ones, I encourage you to share them, because there's a really nice community on this channel and I think we can use that to our advantage to help each other, to build each other up, especially if someone is looking for somewhere to turn to in their time of need. So, ragging, at least according to the internet, is a term used for so-called initiation rituals that are practiced in higher educational institutions in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, and of course, as we know, Sri Lanka. So the practice is similar to hazing in the West, and it often takes a very malignant form wherein newcomers may be subjected to psychological or physical torture. So out of curiosity, I looked into where this practice originated from, because it is certainly not something inherent to our culture. Turns out, ragging is believed to have been started in Sri Lanka after the Second World War, when soldiers returning from war joined universities and brought these military-style practices with them. So originally in the military, these types of practices were meant to break down personal pride and build teamwork. But after that era, as fewer soldiers entered university over time, the culture of it changed, and somehow it became more violent and dangerous, and is now, as we all know, used for political reasons and bullying, because ultimately at the end of the day, that's what it is. Bullying. So for those of you who don't know, ragging in theory is done in the first few months as a new batch enters into university and is generally done by your direct seniors. Ragging is also conducted separately and independently from one department and one faculty to another based on the current existing culture of it. So technically ragging is not legal in Sri Lanka, and that is something we are explicitly told when we enter into university. The Prohibition and Ragging of Other Forms of Violence in Education Institutions Act number 20 of 1988 criminalizes ragging and other forms of violence in educational institutions applicable both to students and staff members. The penalties for ragging can range between 2 to 10 years of rigorous imprisonment depending on the severity of the case, and in some occasions even payments need to be made to compensate victims for the damages caused. So this legal stance was taken 27 years ago. So why are we hearing stories about victims in 2025? It's just not adding up. Why does it seem like all this legislation has little to no effect? The answer is far more complex than you might imagine, at least from the way I see it. So let me take you through the different layers that I think exist, at least according to my understanding. Everything that I want to say in this video is kind of noted down because I understand the complexity and sensitivity of this issue, and I wanted to handle it as delicately as I possibly could, so you'll see me constantly referring. So let's first go back to the origins of it during World War II, where, this ragging practice was supposed to foster a sense of teamwork. Because unlike in private universities, the kind of people, the cross-section of people that come into state universities is one that covers the entire island, so much so that even the dialects spoken, the language used can differ a lot. Culture for sure, and even the backgrounds of different individuals that might even come from similar cultures. And honestly speaking, that was something that fascinated me so much about it, because it was like all of Sri Lanka experienced in one little section, at least in the areas that contributed to it. So I'm unsure of how intense the initial practices in the post World War II era would have been. But essentially, it was supposed to foster this sense of teamwork and unity in one of two ways. The first was either getting junior batches to do different activities with these different people from different backgrounds in a sort of forced way to get them to bond with each other. So, for example, I've heard stories where seniors get their juniors to come early morning to the canteen and eat like buckets of kiribat and things like that, which is supposed to bring them together and give them the opportunity to get to know each other outside of their academic interactions. So it's either this or they bring them together due to a unified hatred that they have towards their seniors because of what they're putting them through. And this, I believe, is where the lines start to get a little blurry. So there are certain initiation rituals or traditions in certain departments that I don't think are necessarily harmful. I don't want to call it ragging because, as we all know, ragging has a very negative connotation to it, one that is appropriately acquired. But there are certain harmless things you do, like playing games, having icebreaker type of activities that could potentially serve to bring a batch together, get you to talk to people you might have otherwise not have. Because there are certain programs that have like 250 to 300 students and even more in some cases. And considering the diversity and nature of different people that come together in these occasions, it can be a good opportunity for you to go out of your comfort zone and meet different kinds of people that have lived lives very, very different to yours. So the question is, what determines if you end up in a faculty that is actively ragging or that is one engaged in harmless tradition? It's very much the people in it. I think there's a lot you can say about a person in the way they choose to exercise power when it is given to them, even just an ounce of it. In general, university culture is similar to a lot of places that exist in Sri Lanka. There is a certain respect that is expected to be given to seniors and, of course, lecturers as well. The issue kind of comes up when seniors are given a little bit of power and responsibility over their juniors. There's different ways that this can go. But one thing we need to realize first is before you are a senior and you're given that power, you're first a junior. And there's a year of history and background that goes into this eventual outcome that happens when you become a senior. And by senior, I mean like in your second year. So before you become a senior, either you were ragged in your junior year by your seniors or you weren't. So for discussion's sake, let's just say you did experience some form of ragging in your first year. This generally produces one of three kinds of result. The first is either you think, I had a really, really bad experience. I don't want anyone else to experience what I had to go through. The second is, oh my gosh, I had a really bad experience. I'm going to make sure my juniors have the same experience or worse so that they suffer the way I suffered. Third, the worst kind, honestly, people that don't know the first thing about being a good leader and abuse the little power they have over their juniors. By the time I actually got into uni, there was no ragging culture in my department. The fourth years in my time, whom from what I understand had allegedly been ragged or experienced some extent of it. They had decided as a batch that they were never going to let their juniors experience that. I don't know the full extent, but I'm sure they would have suffered a lot. But essentially, they changed the game for us. So thankfully, we never had that. Now, I know I'm making this seem very black and white, but I promise you it's not. Often, people that take a stand like this in certain cases, this is not about my department, but from other stories I've heard, have had experiences where their batch starts to break into factions. So you have the non-ragging and the pro-ragging factions within the batch. So there's a whole cold war that can go on in cases like this, and it's not as easy as just waking up one day and deciding to say no. Sometimes their seniors can give them a really hard time. They help out pro-raggers, pitting them against one another. They are kind of biased with providing academic assistance towards people that are more aligned with their own values. And this really shifts the whole balance of equal opportunity, and there's a whole thing there. So for those of us today who don't experience it, we really, really owe it to the batches that took that bullet for us. Which kind of brings me to another very frustrating group, the ones that I call those who never knew war. And basically, these are the kind of people that never got ragged, similar to me, but for some reasons that the bounds of my intellect cannot fully grasp, they think we need to bring back ragging culture. Now, if this is starting to boil your blood, I feel you. We're in the same boat here. I could go on about these kinds of people, but this video would be way too long. So to people like that, I say, be so for real. Where do you have the time, effort, and energy to even begin to do that? It is truly so out of touch and ridiculous. And I've actually witnessed a conversation regarding this issue. So in effort to be as empathetic and objective as I can about this whole situation, like I said, the kind of people that come to uni are really diverse in nature. So while I grew up hearing stories about ragging that were painted in a more negative light, there are some, for lack of a better word, that grew up with the idea of ragging as something of a more romanticized one. So it was a little bit sensationalized to them. In this conversation, someone very calmly and patiently talked sense into this person, and so the situation was kind of easily diffused. There is a very prevalent existence of this type of thinking. It's something interesting to take note of, something to look out for. Now, coming back to the other two groups that I mentioned earlier that don't make any contribution to stop this cycle, actively keep it going. I feel like there's different levels of implementation that they do this in. It doesn't happen so explicitly out in the open. There's different facets to ragging. We most often hear stories of physical exploitation and harassment that take place that must be dealt with immediately, appropriately, and legally because it is simply unacceptable. But what often goes unnoticed is the psychological aspect that there is very much to this. And I think a lot of people go through it. Similar to this Cold War type of situation that I spoke of earlier, it's not so obvious to point out a perpetrator specifically, and much less so to present evidence of it. So I don't want to utilize too much time talking about these kinds of people, but like I said, you tend to expose yourself and your character when you are in a position of power. There is a lot of social hierarchy, ego, and peer validation that comes with the people involved in this. And it requires its own discussion, but in short, I believe, in my opinion, this behavior is a true reflection of a lack of character, intense insecurity, and evidence of a deprivation of attention when these people were younger. Massive inferiority complex, don't even get me started. It is truly, truly vile. This brings us to the victims. Why is this something that is even tolerated? It's kind of easy to ask this question outside looking in. How can a group of students, a batch that is experiencing the same type of abuse in certain instances of ragging be divided into factions of pro and non-ragging? Again, there's a lot of layers to this. Different backgrounds, personal philosophies, and different intersections of these areas that are far, far too complex to be divided into little groups for the sake of this discussion here. I think it has a lot to do with people's personalities, their backgrounds, their upbringing, and also their privilege. For me, example, I was terrified to walk into university, and for no good reason. Because Moratuwa is regarded to be so progressive and laid back. So for me, I lived off campus. I went home. I had the support of my family available at any time. I grew up in a house that, didn't prioritize academic achievement above anything else. You kind of get where I'm going with this. So I could spend a few hours on campus and then leave and go home and go on with my life. And there were other people, plenty of others that were able to do this as well, where they lived off campus and had a clear distinction between life and university. But there are others that ended up living on campus, especially in their first year, far from the comfort of their own home, so they don't have the same kind of freedom. All while dealing with the struggles that come from being in a new city, trying to make real new friends, potential financial struggles, and making that transition from school to university, which personally for me was such a weird time in my life. Because you go from 13 years of a similar routine, practicing the same kind of people, to an abrupt shift. And I was living and attending a university that was within my city. So relatively, my life changed a lot less than some other people. So going back to cases like that, there is no clear distinction between life and university, especially in the first few semesters where you're still trying to get your footing and things like that. If you don't have a bulletproof personality, it's going to be really, really hard. And going to university shouldn't require that kind of resolve in the first place. That is where your personality gets developed. You become and understand the kind of person that you want to be in life. All that students should be burdened with is the scope of responsibilities that come with their coursework. And of course, extracurriculars and things that they might be involved in as well. In cases where there is this lack of distinction, you can have the tendency to look for support from anywhere, which is almost guaranteed to come from your seniors, which can be beneficial as well, which in cases that you end up with pro-raggers, this gets really complicated. The tendency for people in this situation is to end up having nowhere to turn to. They might want to go to administration, but that could kind of worsen the situation. It's really complex. When you lack this solid support system away from family and friends, you could really easily get caught into this. And it's not as easy to just jump and walk away from it because it could jeopardize. People tend to think it can jeopardize your 4 years at university. And this is a case for a lot of people. Failure is not an option. We know the pressures that exist in an average Sri Lankan household surrounding education and academics, the competition that is well known and associated to be with it. So this is not new. This is not new information. It can really put someone in a corner. Everything I've said in this video so far is just one angle to a situation that is experienced in numerous different ways. Because unfortunately, this is a situation that has the potential to happen despite legal action taken against it, and that is very frustrating to have to think about. And I certainly don't think I personally have all the solutions to it because this is a big issue. But from what I gather, in my opinion, there is a certain way out of this, or a way to go forward at least. It's not a snap of the fingers type of solution, but is one that we can maybe consider and contribute towards. And that path goes beyond legislation. It needs cultural change. In my opinion, let me know yours if you have one. The only effective change I see is when it comes from the students, which seems like a no-brainer, but it needs to be an inside job. People that come together and actively break this cycle. These are true game changers and the real leaders and visionaries, I think, that really stepped up to make this change. And this change sometimes doesn't need to be all that revolutionary, groundbreaking, or never done before. Sometimes it's as simple as nipping it in the bud. Like that one conversation I mentioned about people who never knew war. It was a conversation that was addressed in the moment and nipped in the bud. And I've seen it with my own eyes. People looking out for their batchmates that might end up on someone's radar. I've seen people look out for each other in such beautiful ways. Not just for their own batchmates, but also their juniors. It may not be the easiest thing to do with things like peer pressure and groups that kind of validate a certain type of behavior, but I do think we're all capable of making at least one person's life a little bit easier. From a biblical perspective, in the New Testament, there are two main instructions. One is to love God with all your heart, mind, and soul, and the second is to love your neighbor as you love yourself. That is, unselfishly seeking the best or higher for others. I aspire to do better in this area myself, and I learned so much from my friends that have really mastered the art of doing this. Because ultimately, when you know you're loved and valued by God, regardless of where you come from, what your academic standing is, or where you stand even in society, you will know how to love yourself. And you know that you yourself are worthy of that love. And you can only love others as much as you love yourself. So when I hear and see people participating in any form of ragging, which is in contradiction to love and everything that it stands for, it really speaks a lot of their internal issues. The reality is that only a very small percentage of students in the local university system are actually contributing to this issue. Unfortunately, because of the actions of this minority, the reputation of the entire institution is compromised. As a graduate of this system, I can personally attest to the positive impact it has had on my life. During my time there, I met some of the best friends, educators, and mentors. The influence of that experience will stay with me forever. It's a place full of opportunity and hope. Regardless of your background, it's a space where everyone comes together on equal footing. If you're willing, it's a place where you can truly transform your life. So, it is my heart's desire that every person that walks through those gates will one day be able to say their story was one of the same hope, opportunity, and so much more.